Mornings with Will on 531 PI.
You're listening to Pacific Mornings on 531 PI to 7:36 for Friday the 6th of June. I'm William Terite. It is brilliant to have your company. Hope you are having a lovely start to your day, by the way. Now, of course, it is Samoan Language Week, and to celebrate, we're joined by a very special guest this morning to talanoa about not only the language and its beauty and its culture, but the important work she's doing as well. Miss Samoa and Miss Pacific journey in terms of Litara Ieremia-Allan joining us now. Talofa lava, thank you so much for your time.
Talofa lava, ia whatalofa atu la whionga William, a pefo I le paimale malu o whawhomaya. Happy Samoan Language Week.
Happy Samoan Language Week indeed. And look, before we get into Samoan Language Week, I thought we'd do a bit of a catch-up in the sense of just a wee bit of reflection from yourself in terms of your journey so far with Miss Samoa and Miss Pacific.
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey, one that I thank God for every day. Definitely something I never saw myself doing as a young girl. I always looked up to Miss Samoas and Miss Pacifics, but I never thought I had what it would take to hold such a role. But the further I've gone on the journey, I think I've realized the more you are yourself, then people start to respect that. I think authenticity and the way that you hold yourself always speaks volumes to our people. And so it's been a humbling journey to learn how to hold myself in these roles. But something I'm also challenged about in terms of challenging the norm is beauty queens can have brains, can stand for advocacy, and can also be more than physical appearance as well.
Yeah, and that's an important part that you highlight there in the end. Good comment there. I suppose, give us a bit of a sense as to have the title and what it means and what's the day-to-day look like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had the privilege to travel all around the world with this role, and a lot of the time when I speak to foreigners, they kind of disregard the role. They say, it's just a beauty queen, we just do pageants. And I often have to quite humbly educate people to talk about it being a cultural preservation role. It was reframed in the 1980s by our pioneers, our educators, and our female leaders. And they reframed the platform to be a place where it would be used for Tamaita'i Samoa and Pacific women to celebrate Pacific ways and expressions of beauty inside and out. And so every day, whoever holds this role, it's our duty to maintain that, and language is a huge part of that. Every day we're attending events where we speak the language, we celebrate the culture, and a lot of the time we're working with the youth and elderly. We are also in charge of working under the government for the Samoa Tourism Agency, as we all know that tourism is a huge contributor to Pacific revenue, Pacific finances, and so upholding that as well is a huge part of my job. And then we also have the privilege of starting some projects ourselves and traveling across the Pacific and around the world to represent Samoa and the Pacific
Awesome.
to others.
Yeah, that's awesome. I suppose, and here's a bit of a curveball question for you. With that in mind, and you frame it beautifully in the sense of what stands out from these beauty pageants. I mean, the reason I bring it up in that way is, you often look at the Western side of how they do it. And, I mean, there's that stark difference, wouldn't you say, between what we do here in the Pacific and, say, what they do over, for example, over in the United States?
Absolutely. Well, I think each their own, right? Different cultures have different expressions of their identities and how they understand themselves.
Yeah.
I think to be Samoan, to be a Tamaitai, is to understand the term mamalu. And a lot of the time that can be loosely translated to refer to modesty, but it's more than that, right? It's more than just covering, it's more than being dignified. It's a heart posture, and it's the way that you hold yourself. So it's not just about the fact that we don't show as much, too low. It's actually about how we actually conduct ourselves every day. The way that you hold yourself as a Tamaitai, as a Pacific woman, is through service. And so a lot of the time you'll see not just behind these pageants, but these beauty queens are in their communities doing work. They're in elderly homes, they're in the villages, they're planting trees, planting forests, they're traveling all over the world. And so it's the reason why I bring that up is because it's challenging this dusky maiden stereotype. To be a Pacific woman is more than just being what we look like. It's about the service that we do.
That's awesome. Hey, look, let's shift our attention now to Samoan Language Week, of course. And let's start perhaps with a personal reflection. What does the theme mean to you, perhaps?
Yeah, it's a beautiful theme, and I'm challenged every year to understand the theme with the Samoan Language Week in New Zealand. Ia maluno sa for lauilangi ma. I just had the privilege a few weeks ago to to visit Ainga for Laui or Samoa, and that is the Samoan Voyaging Society. They do work in obviously continuing the legacy of Maupialog and also those who came before him, and in terms of voyaging around the Pacific and making sure that it's contextualized within Samoa. And they brought all these high school students to come fix the boat. And here I was thinking, oh, let's just go be Moana from Motunui and sail upon the boat. But it's actually more than that. It's repairing the boat. It's doing the inner work to make sure we have our boat here in Samoa called Mamaji or Ngawalofa. It's making sure that when you're looking after her, she will look after you on the seas. And so my understanding of that theme this year is to be a well prepared and well grounded self is to be working on your inner self, is to be preparing yourself for the journey ahead. And what does that look like? That looks like practicing your ngangana every day, but it also looks like how you're treating people outside of yourself. And I think that example of Ngawalofa is such a beautiful picture of how we can practice our language each day and practice our culture each day. If we look after it, it will look after us.
Certainly. And I suppose with that in mind, tell us about your Samoan language journey and what it's been like living in Samoa as, I believe, someone who grew up in New Zealand. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. So I was born and raised in New Zealand, but I had the privilege of returning to Samoa a lot with my grandparents and my mum's siblings all being based here. As someone who was raised in a minister's family, I had the privilege to start my language journey in Aotearoa Whaiwheao. And I think a lot of the time we can overlook the power of our church ministers, our Whaiwheao and Whaletua, and their contribution to our language journey. And so I did want to take a moment this morning to acknowledge all of those who are working in our faith fields, who are raising our kids in the language on foreign soil. So I had the privilege of learning that in Hamilton, Kirikiriroa.
Oh,
And then I also had the chance to continue that journey on in my journey at Victoria University, where I worked under many teachers in Gagana Sāmoa over there. But all throughout, it was a guiding prayer of my grandmother and my aunties who always instilled the ngangana in me. But I do think it takes a personal decision to keep pushing to learn more, to not stay stagnant. And so hence why I chose to move back to Samoa to work on that. And I also took part in the Anofale program last year, which is a mentorship and leadership program in Samoa designed for young Tamaitai leaders. And I think that was my, open door into practicing it all the time. And it's been a very rich journey, a really exciting one, lots of laughter involved. And I think the biggest thing I would encourage anyone who's trying to grow in their Gagana Sāmoa is just do it. Don't overlook the small ways that you just have to keep going and keep making mistakes, is one of my teachers always told me, is just to keep making mistakes, keep going forward, and immerse yourself in little ways that can help gradually build.
indeed. Now, like many young Pacific people, you walk that fine line between navigating your identity as both Samoan and South African. How do you deal with that?
I think it's it's a blessing.
Mm.
There's, as you said, there's so many Samoan children out there that hold not only two languages or, sorry, two cultures at home, but multiple, right? Um, but I did want to take a moment to acknowledge the role of non-Samoan parents
Yes.
and bilingual parents per se, because I think a lot of the time the emphasis is on the Samoan parent. The Samoan parent must instill, and the Samoan family must instill. But just as that is important, it takes a supportive non-Samoan parent to instill their child, knowing that it's okay to, and more than okay, it's beautiful to be Samoan. I had the privilege of being raised by a South African dad that made sure I went to Fight Love Levis. I went to every Siva competition. He was behind me. He was my aiuli, and he immersed himself in the Fat Samoa from the day that he was with my mother. So to those parents that might be wondering, whether your child is 3 or 20 and you're wondering, what's my role to play? Your role is to tell them that being Samoan is beautiful and supporting them to uphold their culture. And I think it's been a team effort from my family. Walking the fine line is just being yourself.
Mm.
There's no one way to be a Tamaitai or be Samoan. You just be yourself, and that's when you start understanding what being Samoan is to you. And I think being in this role, I've learned that maybe I didn't spend all my time in Samoa growing up. Maybe my language journey has been up and down. Maybe I have multilingual, multicultural families, but that's what makes me me. And that is part of the contribution to Samoan society.
Yeah, certainly. And look, just on the ground in the sense of, give us an idea of some exciting new projects that you have been involved in or some that are in the pipeline perhaps.
Absolutely. Man, so many beautiful opportunities while being in this reign. I just returned back from Savaii where I got to give back to my village in Sapapali. As a former educator myself, I went back into our Sunday schools and our primary schools back in Sapapali to give stationery packs and to promote applying yourself. So
Hmm.
I worked with Digicel Samoa to provide a scholarship and a new award for a top student in Sapali Primary. We also have a really exciting project being launched indeed very soon, and it's called the Upufat Malosi podcast. It's been a dream of mine to try to link Samoans in Samoa and the Samoan diaspora into a conversational approach to what it means to be Samoan and the
Mm.
the layers of it. So it's going to be released very, very soon. Our first episode is coming out, and it's where I speak to different Samoan women about their different fields. We have leaders in health all the way to faith, from entrepreneurship to the diaspora. And there will be episodes every week being announced very shortly. um, I think for me, a big part of the role is to make sure that I'm giving back to those who helped me to get to this part.
Mm.
And so we have another round of the Anofale program coming up as well, which is the mentorship and leadership program, where I'll be leading and taking some girls through a personal workshop of mine,
Hmm.
where we end our 8-week program in an exhibition. So I'm really excited about that. It's something that has really helped me understand who I am. And it's a place where I believe young women can feel safe and grow in their cultural understanding of themselves.
Indeed. Hey, finally, before we wrap it up, perhaps what's your message to not only young Samoans but Pacific youth in general in terms of navigating their identity when they're away from their ancestral home?
Yeah, I think um, I think the biggest asset that you have as a young Pacific Islander growing up on someone else's land is you understand what it means uh, to to understand context. So you grow up on someone else's land, you learn to respect it. You learn to respect their language, their culture, as well as your own. And so already from a young age, you're being raised to be a world citizen, not just someone that's fixed on your own culture, your own language, but someone that's contributing to a wider context. And so I think what I would encourage those who are living, to those who are living overseas maybe, is understand that in every alanga upo, in every proverb, it speaks about us being people of the land, being people of the ocean. But to understand that is also you understand the context of other people's lands and other people's oceans, and to know that maybe you haven't gone back home yet, but home is always here and it's always waiting for you. And so as we grow up around the world, we learn to respect other people. That then in turn comes back to our own people and our own culture to serve them at a wider scale. And so I'd just like to say that to keep going. If you feel down about being pressured, or you feel like you want to assimilate or any kind of thing like that, just understand the light can never be pushed out of you. And so being you in whatever context you have is based on that love for your culture, but also the respect for others that will make our world a better place.
Indeed. Beautiful words. Hey, thank you very much for your time this morning. I really appreciate it. That is Litara Ieremia-Allan. You have a good rest of your day, eh?
Thank you, William, and Manuela Wasso.
Cheers. You're listening to Pacific